The Major League Baseball season is over as the Houston Astros finished off the Philadelphia Phillies over the weekend in the World Series. So that means the offseason is underway. So, with that, we're going to start things off by taking a look at the current roster for the Atlanta Braves, ranking them by tier. Who is the superstar? Who is untouchable? Who can they do without? We'll go through the roster like that, go through some key offseason dates as well. A lot to talk about coming up here in the next couple of weeks. So, let's get into it.
You are Locked On Braves, your daily Atlanta Braves podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey, and welcome back to Locked On Braves, part of Locked On Sports Atlanta, where we talk about your favorite Atlanta sports teams each and every day. I'm your host, Jake Mastriani. You can follow me on Twitter at ShortstopBall. Also, make sure you follow the podcast on Twitter at LockedOn_Braves. Send in any questions, comments, or feedback that you have on the podcast. If you're watching on YouTube, make sure you subscribe. We're about to go over 3,000 subscribers, which is just insane. So I appreciate all the support there. If you are watching this video, hit that thumbs up button and that notification bell. Help us continue to spread the word. And as always, thanks for making Locked On Braves your first listen of each and every day. Continuing to post episodes daily throughout the offseason. And like I said in the open, a lot to get to this offseason. I love the baseball offseason. Look, I certainly love when there's games happening on the field. That is clearly the best, but I do love the baseball offseason. You just never know when things are really going to crank up and get going, but certainly a lot to get to for the Braves this offseason, and we're going to talk all about that. I want to quickly give you some key offseason dates here to start, but then I want to get into player rankings. I want to just take stock of the current roster that the Braves have. You know, if they went into the season with what they have right now, and they're not going to, they're going to make moves, they're going to upgrade their roster for sure. But I want to go through and kind of rank the players by tiers. Who are superstar players, your cornerstone players? Who are your good players that you need? Who are your role players that, you know, maybe you can do without, or perhaps where you could upgrade? And then who are some players that are tradable? Who are some players that maybe the Braves could look to trade this offseason because they have some depth there, or they just don't make sense, or where you can make an upgrade? So we're going to talk a lot about that on today's podcast. Always, if you're watching live, I really do appreciate it. I got a good bit in here right now. So let me know your comments throughout the way as I go through this list, and then I'll get to those later in the podcast. But quickly, I want to just give a shout out to the Houston Astros. They took care of the NL East foe, Philadelphia Phillies. A really fun World Series, I thought. I heard some people saying they thought it was boring. I thought it was a really entertaining series. And the home run by Yordan Alvarez in Game 6 of the World Series, if for some reason you didn't check it out, go back and watch that. I mean, it gave me a remembrance of, not that I needed a reminder, but Jorge Soler's home run in Game 6 of last year's World Series had that same kind of vibe, that when Soler hit it, especially with the way Max Fried was pitching, you knew the game was over. Same thing with Yordan Alvarez home run, which went 450 feet to dead center field. You knew as soon as he hit that, it was over, and that was the Astros World Series. Credit to them. I thought the Astros were the best team in baseball all year long. That's who I picked at the beginning of the postseason. I think it showed ultimately there's the depth of pitching that they had, you know, ran down that Phillies lineup, who eventually just kind of cooled off. Those last three starts from Christian Javier, Justin Verlander, and then Framber Valdez in the final game. I mean, that just shows where the Astros pitching was, and hopefully where the Braves are going to get to. Look, and I talked with some people on Twitter about this as well. If the Braves played their best game, could they have beaten the Astros in the World Series? Yeah, I think so. But I do think the Astros were just a little bit more of a complete team and had a lot more depth in that rotation, or more depth. I wouldn't say a lot more, but especially, you know, they were pitching better at this time. Braves certainly were not, as evident by their NLDS exit. But time to move on. World Series is over. I want to quickly give you some key off-season dates before I get into my player rankings. November 7th, the GM meetings. Probably not much going to happen there, as the season just ended. But on November 10th, free agency officially begins. This is also the deadline to tender a qualifying offer, which the Braves most likely will, to Dansby Swanson. It's also the deadline for most contract options, player options, team options, for them to make a decision. For the Braves, that's Jake Odorizzi, and they're waiting to see if he's going to pick up that $12.5 million player option or if he will opt out, in which case he'll still get a pretty nice buyout. I tend to lean, and I think it could go either way. I tend to think he's going to opt out. Look, if he can get more than $6 million in free agency, or he thinks he can, it's really in the best interest of Jake Odorizzi to opt out. That way he can go choose where he wants to play. Again, probably get more money out of it. And I don't really know what role he has with the Braves. I mean, to be quite honest, if he accepted that contract, I don't think you just throw him into the rotation. The Braves might, because you'd be paying him $12 million. But I just think it's in the best interest of everybody, honestly. If he opts out of that contract, Braves still have to pay him, again, I think it's $6.5 million. And then he gets to choose where he wants to go. And he's probably going to get more than the other $6 million that he would have gotten. So I think he's going to opt out. I think the Braves are going to give Dansby Swanson a qualifying offer. I did want to say Joseph's recap commented, said, so happy for Dusty Baker going back to the World Series. Right there with you. I was so glad to see Dusty Baker get that World Series ring. I get a lot of people still mad at the Houston Astros, but I was happy for Dusty Baker. All right, after that, November 15th is the deadline to accept or reject that qualifying offer. So just 5 days there for those players to make that decision. I think Dansby will decline the qualifying offer, but it's a $19.2 million qualifying offer. With the market the way it is, and there's a lot of shortstops, I've talked about this before, it might be in Dansby's best interest to accept that 1-year qualifying offer, come back next year where he'll likely be the top of the shortstop market and see if he can get a big deal then. But I still think either way, it's probably his best shot now to try to get that long-term deal. November 15th is also the deadline to add eligible minors to your 40-man roster to protect them from the Rule 5 draft. Braves have several eligible for that. I do believe they will put a couple on there. Darius Vines, probably a one lock to be on there. Maybe Victor Vodnik as well. So a couple of names for the Atlanta Braves that they need to add to the 40-man roster by November 15th in order to protect them from the Rule 5 draft. November 18th, the non-tender deadline. A couple of candidates there as well. What are the Braves going to do with Tyler Matzik, Mike Soroka? Do they tender them contracts? Guillermo Heredia, another one they could non-tender. So that date is November 18th. And then December 5th through December 7th will be the winter meetings, the crown jewel of the baseball offseason. A lot of stuff goes down there, or at least a lot of stuff is rumored and talked about. And that's December 5th through 7th. So things are going to start happening here rapidly over the next couple of weeks. We're going to have a lot to talk about, to discuss, and we'll know a lot more about what the offseason is going to look like. And also, Alex Anthopoulos has worked very quickly in the offseason. Typically, when he has things he knows he wants to get done, he will knock those out early in the offseason. So be on the lookout for that as well. All right, I asked this question on Twitter. A lot of you responded there. And I asked right now, as the current Braves roster is constructed, how many wins would you project them to win? And, that's a lineup of Acuna, Harris, Riley, Olsen, Michael Harris, d'Arnaud, Contreras, Rosario, just like it is. Arcia starting at shortstop, a rotation of Fried, Wright, Strider, Morton, a bullpen of Iglesias, Minter, McHugh, Lee. How many games could that team win? Because I really think that's a pretty good team and a playoff contending team. A lot of you agreed with me. Most of you said that that's probably an 85 to a 90 win team. And that's a postseason team. Phillies just got in with that many wins. The Braves got in last year with 88 wins. So look, I say that just to say the starting point of the offseason for the Braves is already a really good team, a playoff contending team. Obviously, the Braves are going to go out and make moves. They got to do something at shortstop or left field. And, we've talked about that they got to go out at least Dansby, if not bring Dansby back at shortstop. If a better move is to get a big bat in left field and then kind of do a stopgap situation at shortstop, or maybe you let Arcia play there until Von Grissom is maybe ready if you feel like he can handle the position defensively. So there's options to go about it. Either way, the Braves know they need to make some upgrades, create some more depth. But the whole point of that is just to say the team right now, when you enter the offseason, it's already at a really good point. There's a really good foundation there of a team that's ready to win and can compete to win, even if you did nothing else this offseason. But they're going to, Alex is going to, and it's going to be a lot of fun, and we're going to talk about it. With that out of the way, when I come back, I want to start looking at the player tiers for this Atlanta Braves team, ranking the players, who's the superstars, who are the good players, who are the role players. We'll talk about all of that next. The NFL season is in full swing, and BetOnline.net has you covered for all the action out there, whether you're looking for scores, podcasts, highlights, analysis, everything that you need, you can get at BetOnline. So make sure you go over there and check them out. Right now, you got Chiefs and Titans playing at the moment. A lot of football action going on. The NBA is getting started up, NHL, a lot of sports action going on. And as always, BetOnline remains your continued source for all your sport wagering information with live betting and up-to-the-minute scores for every sport out there. Head to betonline.net or use your mobile device to learn more. BetOnline, where the game starts. So let's start with our tier ranking. And I'm going to start with the superstars. These are the players that aren't going anywhere. These are your cornerstone players that you are building around for the next, 10 years. These guys are going to be the core of your foundation. Ronald Acuna Jr., Austin Riley, Matt Olson, Michael Harris. Position player wise, those are your foundation players. There's one player in there I omitted. I'm going to get to him in a second. But for me, those are your foundation players. And whoever the Braves bring back at shortstop, they bring back Dansby on a long deal. They go out and get a Correa or a Turner on a long deal. You could add them in there. But again, we're talking about as the roster stands right now, position player wise, it's Acuna, Riley, Olson, Michael Harris. That's your core position player group. Everything else builds off of them. On the pitching side of things, in the starting rotation, for me, it's Max Fried and it's Spencer Strider. And I think Spencer Strider, could become the leader of that rotation. I think that highly of him, and I think that's the direction he's going. But for now, it's Max Fried, Spencer Strider, 1, 2. You got some good pieces off of them, but those are the two guys you build the rotation around. And then I mentioned Marcell Iglesias and AJ Minter in that superstar category as well. With the way Marcell Iglesias pitched for the Braves down the stretch and how, he's been obviously a really good closer, earned that big contract that he got from the Angels, and AJ Minter, one of the most dominant relievers in all of baseball last year. I mean, those are two guys that to me are untouchable on this Braves team. That's what you build the bullpen around. And it helps that one's a righty, one's a lefty. So to me, those are your superstars, guys who aren't going anywhere. Those are what you're building, each piece of your team around. Position players, starting pitchers, bullpen, those are your guys. Now, for your good players, these are your players that probably won't get moved. These are that you kind of build those superstar players we just mentioned. And for me, it's Dylan Lee and Colin McHugh. Those are guys that I feel like they're going to be a big part of the rotation. They're good pieces, they're good players, but not necessarily to that superstar level. In the rotation, for me, it's Kyle Wright and Charlie Morton. Those are good players, and maybe Kyle Wright in that superstar level after the year he just had. Let me know, certainly in the chat or in the comments, if you disagree with that. But for me, I still put him in that good category. He and Charlie Morton. Obviously, Charlie Morton coming off a disappointing season. I've got a lot of comments, people saying that they wish Charlie Morton would go away. That's not going to happen. He's going to be here. Let's just all hope he has a bounce back season. And then position player wise, these are your good players. And again, some of these players are really good, all-star level good, but I'm still putting them in this good category. Travis d'Arnaud and William Contreras, to me, those guys aren't going anywhere. Together, they're a superstar, that's for sure. And, they're obviously all-star level talents as well, but I still put them in that good category. But just the combination of those two makes them a superstar. And then maybe this might be a controversial one. I put Ozzy Albies in the good player group. To me, he's not on that superstar level right now. Can he get there? Sure. But, obviously 2022 is a lost season for Ozzy Albies. I mean, let's just call it what it is. He did not play good from the start. He got hurt, came back for a game and a half, got hurt again. 2022 is a lost season from him. So I got to knock him down a peg. Maybe before coming into last season, maybe I would have put him in that superstar category because of what he brings you defensively. I honestly, and maybe this is a discussion for another day. If Ozzy were to come back in 2023 and he continues to kind of struggle at the plate, be more of a 230, 240 hitter, and Ozzy may be a guy that benefits more from the shift going away. We talk about it a lot with Matt Olson, but I think Ozzy could be a guy that benefits from that as well. As when he's hitting left-handed, he pulls a lot of balls to the right side. But if he comes back and he just doesn't have it, I wouldn't mind seeing Ozzy Albies in that 9 spot. We talked about on the last podcast that how great the 9 hole was for the Braves last year. And obviously, anytime Ronald Acuna Jr. is batting behind you, I think that gives you a good bit of protection. To have Ozzy Albies down in the 9 spot where, he can take you deep. If the pitcher tries to relax with the 9 hole hitter, he can get on base and immediately gives you a speed threat ahead of the top of the order. I'm not saying that's what the Braves should do. I think ideally, if Ozzy is the player that he's been, we know him to be, I like him more in the 5th, 6th spot in the order, bringing in that production, driving in runs. But I'm just saying, if Ozzy, continues to maybe regress a little bit hitting wise, maybe put him in that 9 spot. I think that could be a situation where he thrives. Looking at role players for the Braves, I put Kirby Yates, Orlando Arcia, Guillermo Heredia, Eddie Rosario in this category. Kirby Yates as a role player is just a situation where what can you expect from him? The Braves aren't going to move him. They're not going to do anything with him. They're just hoping he can be, a solid right-handed reliever. Obviously, when you think of role players, it's either going to be, your righty, lefty matchups in the bullpen, or it's going to be your bench players. Guillermo Heredia has one role. It's to wave some swords. It's to play some outfield defense every now and then. And that's pretty much it. Be a mascot for the team. Rosario at this point is a role player because he's just a left-handed bat, to me, off the bench. I don't think you can go into the year with Eddie Rosario being your starting left fielder. So Orlando Arcia, his role, he's just a utility player. He can fill in nicely if a guy's out, on the IL for a week or two. Certainly not somebody that you want to be your everyday, infielder, but can play a lot of positions across the infield. And like I said, can serve for a while if you have a player out with an injury. So those are your role players. Players the Braves can do without, that they could either cut, trade, get rid of. Heredia, in my mind, can go. I love the guy. I love the energy he brings and, how good he is for the clubhouse. But the guy has the best $1 million job I think anybody can have. He hardly ever plays. He has fun and just makes $1 million hanging out with, some of the best players in all of baseball. Eddie Rosario, for me, I think that's somebody who can go if you can move him. And obviously, Marcell Ozuna, if you can move him, cut him, whatever. Those are players to me that can just automatically go. And I'm obviously not going through everybody on the 40-man roster. There's several relievers out there that the Braves can cut and are going to have to make room for some of these prospects on the 40-man roster. And then finally, I want to talk about players who are tradable. And this is mainly some of your young players, some prospects that I think can trade. I got Ian Anderson on that list. Value is obviously very low, so I don't think there's much value in trading him right now. But if there's a team that, thought they could fix him or wanted, could give him a chance, perhaps you package him in a deal with Ozuna and another prospect. I could see the Braves, moving on from Ian Anderson. I don't think they will, but to me, in my mind, he's become a player that's somewhat tradable if he has the value, obviously, in the right deal. Bryce Elder, Kyle Muller, Freddie Tarnock. These are all players in my mind who are tradable. Guys I like and guys I have, big hopes for, but guys I feel like could be traded. Obviously, Rosario and Ozuna are players that if they are tradable, I think could be traded as well. So that kind of goes through my tier list of players. Let me know in the comments what you think. Do you have them ranked somewhere else? Do you have different feelings on some of these players? Do you still consider Ozzy Albies to be a superstar level player? Let me know in your comments below, and we'll get to those here next. All right, so let's jump into some of the comments. Got a lot of people in here tonight in the chat, and I do appreciate that. Um, Hines says our boy Will Smith has more rings than Freddie Freeman. Yeah, that was something else from the World Series celebration. I completely forgot that Will Smith was on that team, and then we were out, or I saw him out there on the field celebrating afterwards, and it's kind of crazy. Will Smith, back-to-back World Series champion. Champs 2021 says, I was happy to see Bryce lose. I'm kind of over being mad at Bryce Harper. I honestly wish Braves fans would stop booing him. It just seems to feed him even more at this point. To me, he's just a fun player. I think he's kind of over some of that immaturity that he had earlier in his career. But, to each their own. You want to boo Bryce Harper, by all means, and go for it. Can certainly understand it. The guy plays with an edge, may rub some people the wrong way. Joseph Recap says Sam Hilliard is the newest Braves player. I did see him when I was going through the 40-man roster earlier that Sam Hilliard was added. Another just, low-key move, adding him to the 40-man rosters, creating some more outfield depth. I think he's somebody, that could replace Heredia on the bench. I haven't really had a chance to look at his splits or anything, but certainly somebody, just to give you some more outfield depth. He had a career high 14 home runs last year, had a 757 OPS and 230 at bats for the Rockies. So you got to take that into mind. 28 years old, high strikeout rate, 28.5%. So again, nothing that's really going to move the needle at all. But certainly somebody that's just going to give you a little bit more depth. Not a big move there. It looks like the Braves are sorry. They traded Dylan Spain as part of that deal for Sam Hilliard. So just kind of going through that trade here kind of live, as I missed that beforehand, but I did see him on the 40-man rosters going through that. So just a little bit of outfield depth for the Braves. I was going to check real quick to see if Sam Hilliard has some minor league options left. I would certainly hope so, with the Braves making that type of deal, because I would assume that he's probably doesn't have a spot on lock. He doesn't have any minor league options. Okay, so that's a surprising move right there, because Spain was not somebody that the Braves had on the 40-man roster. Maybe he is due a 40-man spot. I apologize for the lateness of kind of looking into that one. But again, just some outfield depth there. Could be getting ready maybe to non-tender Guillermo Heredia to take his spot on the bench. Acuna playing as a designated hitter for his Venezuelan team. Yeah, I mentioned that on Friday's podcast, and I believe that's his first game is going to be November 23rd. I know it's at the end of November, so I think that's great. Again, I said on the last podcast, I think that's awesome for Acuna. I think that's awesome for Venezuela to be able to see him in person and watch that. And great job by the Braves allowing that to happen after originally they said no. Great job allowing him to play in those games in front of his home country. I think that's going to be really cool. And I'm probably going to have to spend the $13 or whatever it is so that I can watch those games through that feed. Champ 2021 says, I wish Fried would get extended. This is a good conversation. Probably not for now, but we may get into it. We talked about it last offseason. I think Alex Anthopoulos is just hesitant to extend pitchers. I know he did Spencer Strider, but a lot of that was just buying out his arbitration years. You still got Max Fried, for a couple more seasons here under arbitration. And extending pitchers, especially into their 30s, is just very risky, especially at the price that Max Fried is going to cost. Yeah, I would love it. Look, I love Max Fried. I think he's proved his worth. He's started, there may have been a little questions early on about his ability to stay healthy, stay on the field. I think he's kind of answered that. I would not hate it. I'll say that. I love Max Fried. I want him around for a long time. I also think Spencer Strider is going to overtake him as the ace of this team here before too long. Let's take this question here. Team Rofa says, if we let Swanson go, do we do everything in our power to get Trey Turner? One thing I do know about Alex Anthopoulos, he's not going to be forced into any situation. And If Dansby Swanson doesn't work out, yeah, he'll pivot and he'll try to make the best of a situation, and he will get somebody. Same thing last year with Freddie Freeman, Matt Olson, when it looked like Freddie Freeman wasn't going to work out for whatever reason. He quickly pivoted, went and got a really great player in Matt Olson. Look, if things don't work out with Dansby Swanson, I got all the confidence that Alex Anthopoulos will do something, whether that's Trey Turner, Xander Bogaerts, Carlos Correa, if it's a trade, Willie Adames, Tim Anderson, whatever it may be. I got full confidence that Alex will get a solid replacement there. But I would not put all my eggs in one basket for either Dansby Swanson or Trey Turner. I think there are other options out there that Alex can do. Here's another one talking about Jock Peterson. Joseph Recap. Wouldn't mind bringing back Peterson this offseason. I wouldn't either, but the roster is so tight. We're going to talk about the 40-man roster here later this week. The roster is so tight. And again, I mentioned the minor league players the Braves need to add to protect from the Rule 5 draft. It's just so going to be so hard to make really any moves before you make subtractions. The Braves have to subtract players before they can add any at this point. Docs fan says, let's be honest, Heredia is the star of the team. Just makes me laugh every time when the Braves are talking about making acquisitions or they call a player up, and Heredia survives every time and stays on this roster just strictly to swipe some swords. And he does, fills a defensive replacement that the Braves needed this year because of Ronald's health and not able to be out in the outfield. But yeah, I laugh every time when Heredia just survives a roster cut, it seems like. Joseph's Recap also says, would love to have a healthy Ozzy in 2023. Me too. Look, don't take me putting Ozzy Albies in the good category instead of the superstar category as a slight. I love Ozzy Albies, but I think that's fair based on, his 2022 season. Josh Ghetto, I want to read this one here, says, going to be interesting to see what they do with Matzik. I'd love to see AA sign him to a deal, buying out the last 2 ARB years at a discount. Maybe add a club option for a 3rd year. I talked about this as well. I certainly hope so. Would love to see them do that with Matzik. I think he's earned it. The guy gave his arm for a World Series. Give him $1 million this year, maybe $3-4 million next year. And like you said, maybe even a team option for a year after that. I think he's earned it. And I think, just giving him that respect, I think that would be the right thing to do. Ozzy and Ronnie feed off each other, so Oz being in the 9 spot is actually a good idea. Look, I like it. I just, with the, obviously with the DH now, not having that pitcher spot there, it just kind of gives you a second leadoff hitter. And I think we just saw that with the Braves this year, whether you put Dansby down there, Michael Harris down there, Vaughn Grissom down there, whoever they put in that 9 spot, it just seemed to really get them going, and it seemed to make the offense go. So again, I kind of like the idea of having Ozzy there, especially against right-handed pitchers. He's obviously much better against lefties, hitting from the right side. So I think especially against righties, I think maybe you bat Ozzy 9th. I think that might be the spot for him. If we do sign Trey Turner, we would have the most dangerous lineup in baseball. Certainly from an offensive standpoint, I do worry about Trey Turner defensively, but yeah, I mean, look, Trey Turner's a great player. He's power, speed. He has it all. Would certainly would not mind it. World Baseball Classic this March. Thanks for mentioning that as well. Joseph Recap, that is coming up this March. Should be a lot of fun. A lot of good players. Mike Trout's there. That's all I needed. I'm on board. You got the World Cup this December, November, I think. And then you got the World Baseball Classic after that. So a lot of international clashing going on. Hey to Greg Brownfield. Manny Pena. Josh Ghetto brought up Manny Pena. Thanks for adding that in there. Manny Pena, I'd put him in that role player category. He's a backup catcher. I'd also put him in that tradable category. I think he is somebody who does get traded this offseason. Wonder what the season would look like without the shift next year. This question from Joseph Recap. I think it's going to be interesting, and I don't think anybody knows. I think that's going to be something we're going to see teams adjust on the fly. I wonder how it affects players in free agency this year, players who are dead pool hitters who maybe have seen their average drop because of the shift. Do teams go after those players more now? I think it's going to be very interesting. I think we're going to have to learn that on the fly a little bit. Dogs fan says, I wonder if AA goes after Rodon. Since he opted out today. I think a lot of teams are going to go after Carlos Rodon. I don't think the Braves are going to be one of them. I think he's going to get a bigger deal than what Alex Anthopoulos feels comfortable giving Carlos Rodon because he's going to get multiple years. Typically, when Alex is signing a veteran pitcher like that, especially one with the injury history of Carlos Rodon, I don't see him giving a lot of years, 3-4 years, which what he's probably going to get. Typically, AA going after those veteran pitchers, it's on a 1-year deal at a high AAV, something like that. And Joseph Recap talking about the trade, said Spain had an ERA above 5. So, yeah, I mean, obviously not going to give up much there for Sam Hilliard. Bad thing is that Dansby Swanson still uses Casey Close as his agent. Look, it's going to be one thing I'll say. I talked earlier how Alex Anthopoulos moves quick in the offseason. They get in these offseason negotiations, and Dansby's side is still holding firm. There's no movement. Look, don't sleep on Alex pivoting and going and getting something done, especially if, Correa comes off the market and Trey Turner comes off the market. Don't sleep on Alex. He will pivot. You want to call his bluff? You want a Freddie Freeman situation all over again? I would not call that man's bluff. He will pivot. He will go get something, and he'll get something good. I do believe in that. Next year, we'll have a fully healthy Acuna again. I certainly hope so. Look, I'm so excited for I know he won bounce back player of the year based on player voting, but I think next year is going to be the real bounce back year for Ronald Acuna Jr. Are Michael Harris and Ronald Acuna be top 3 best duo in outfield or outfielders in MLB? I certainly think so, especially when Acuna's back full healthy. I think that's going to be a really fun outfield to watch. Tyler Anderson seem more like an AA type than Rodon, I guess. Either one would be a good addition, in my opinion. Yeah, I could see him maybe taking a smaller deal for a 4th, 5th starter, maybe a Drew Smiley type deal, a 1-year deal at maybe a $10 million AAV. I know people didn't like the Drew Smiley deal, but I could see Alex doing something like that rather than giving somebody like Rodon a 3-4 year deal. Alex in his 10 years has been more about giving a high AV 1-year deal rather than a multi-year deal. Last question here from Juan Soto joining the chat tonight. He says, is Dansby in his prime? Dansby will play next year at 29, so he is definitely still in his prime. But obviously, we're looking at a 5-6 year deal. So you still feel good about the next 3 to 4 years of Dansby. But one thing you got to consider with Dansby is his biggest asset is his defense. And that's typically the first thing to go. And the biggest thing about his defense is his range, which is certainly the first thing to go for aging shortstop. So that's got to worry you a little bit. If he doesn't continue to hit like he did in 2022, the defensive range starts to decline. You're left with a $20+ million a year player who's declining. And that's obviously always a risk anytime you're signing a player in their late 20s, early 30s to a long-term deal. That's why Alex wasn't that comfortable going to 6 years on Freddie Freeman for that very reason. So look, there's risk in all these deals, but Dansby Swanson still should pretty much be in his prime for the next 3 or 4 years. And we'll take this one last question here. Is Duvall still under contract? He is not. Adam Duvall is a free agent, and I do think he's somebody that perhaps the Braves look to sign. Could be later in the offseason if nothing else works out and they wanted to create a platoon, with Duvall, Rosario, something like that. I could see them bringing back Duvall. In my mind, Duvall and Rosario are both bench players at this point. They're both role players, not starters, but put them together. Maybe you get a starting left fielder, but Duvall is a free agent, to answer your question. All right, a bit long-winded tonight, but I appreciate all the comments and questions. Great discussions there. We're getting into the offseason. This is the fun stuff, so I'm glad you're here joining me for that. Looking forward to this all offseason. Make sure you do join the streams live every time I do go live, and I'll let you know when that's going to happen. Thanks for all the comments, whether you're in chat section live, whether you're watching the replay and leaving a comment down in the YouTube section. I do appreciate all the support. But that will do it for this episode of Locked On Braves. Thank you for making Locked On Braves your first listen of the day. Now go make sure you give Locked On MLB your second listen. MLB expert Paul Francis Sullivan brings humor, passion, and a unique perspective on every team, talking about the biggest stories from around the league, have everything covered this offseason, talking about every team out there. Again, thanks for listening. Make sure you follow us on Twitter at LockedOn_Braves. Follow me at ShortstopBall. Also, make sure you rate, review, and subscribe to the Locked On Braves podcast wherever you get your podcast, and we will talk to you next time.